On yesterday's podcast, I did a short introduction to the thinking of the British essayist G.K. Chesterton. And I only mention that because one of Chesterton's points is that we live in an age. Now, Chesterton wasn't just talking about the 21st century or 2022. He was actually talking about the modern age, but what he says is especially true of now. He says we live in an age where common sense seems to have become uncommon. Now, how odd is this? Common sense, in a sense, is not the knowledge of specialized intellectuals. It's not the knowledge of deep-thinking philosophers. It is called common sense because everyone is supposed to kind of have it. It is the sense of living in the world, and there are certain things that you know and take for granted, and it's obvious that they're true. And so common sense is nothing more than the widely distributed shared knowledge that allows you and me to look outside the window and say, there is a tree. Think of how odd the world would be if I looked out of the window and said, there is a tree, and you said, no, there is a bear, or there is an antelope, or there is a mountain. And we couldn't even agree on what our own two eyes were suggesting to us. Now, common sense, I think, has been the deposit of practical wisdom in the world. The problem with today is that common sense seems in the modern age to be unreliable. And by unreliable, what I mean is that there are so many things that people throughout the centuries took to be obvious, took to be true, never really even questioned. And yet we know now that those things may not be true or are not true. I've been talking about the Iliad and the Odyssey, for example. It's taken for granted in the Iliad and the Odyssey that monarchy is sort of the only form of government, perhaps even the only imaginable form of government. It never seems to occur to anyone in the Iliad or the Odyssey that there's an alternative way to organize society. Society is hierarchical. There's a king. And you might be the king over here, another guy may be a king over there, but that there is going to be a king over every territory is kind of assumed. If we think historically, we see that people, as part of common sense, have believed that the earth is flat. Why? Because it looks flat. That there are only a handful of stars in the sky. Why? Because that's all we can see. That the earth is stationary. Why? Because if you jump up in the air, you don't end up 30 feet away. You end up just where you started. So the earth doesn't seem to be moving. It looks like the sun is going around the earth. Why? Because in the morning we have a sunrise, in the evening we have a sunset. And it appears common sense to people that the normal state of things is inertia. If you see a stone, it's just lying there. That's its natural state. If a stone is moving, well, then something must have moved it. So these are all beliefs of common sense. All swans are white. Why? Because every time you see a swan, it's white. You never see swans of any other color. You assume that all swans are white. That's common sense. If someone starts talking about swans of a different color, you think, wow, what's wrong with you? Or simply the idea that matter is solid. Here I'm sitting with a table right below me. I can knock my knuckles on the table. It's solid. Now, what's happened is that we've seen through modern astronomy and modern science and modern physics that a lot of these once commonsensical beliefs are, in fact, as I say, either inadequate or wrong. In fact, what we consider to be solid matter isn't so solid after all. There's a lot of gaps when you begin to look at things at the subatomic level. Obviously, it is the Earth that moves around the sun, not the other way around, and so on. So Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, about 100 years ago, called common sense, quote, the metaphysics of the savage. And I think what he meant is that common sense is, in a sense, unsophisticated. But I want to argue that this is actually wrong. And the reason it's wrong is this, that yes, human beings can be commonsensically wrong or mistaken about things that they are not in a position to ultimately verify. If I look out at the sky, I don't know what's beyond the 7 or 8 or 30 stars that I can see. They could very well be a whole lot. I just don't have good enough eyes or a telescope to be able to tell me. So where common sense really works is when we are talking about the practical wisdom with which we run our own lives. And so things as simple as, hey, listen, I actually asked Debbie and she goes, well, here's a good one. Don't go for a run without tying your shoelaces. That's common sense. And on that commonsensical view is completely correct. It's just as correct in the 21st century as it was, let's say, 5 centuries ago. Or to quote the comedian Jeff Foxworthy, he goes, if you want to learn about common sense, if you really you're coming home after a long drive and you really have to go to the bathroom, he says, don't start unbuttoning your pants like 30 yards before you get to the bathroom because bad things are going to happen. Your body will take a cue that you're already there and will actually start doing its thing. So again, use good sense when you are performing this kind of an operation. Well, the broader point is that today we need the common sense that says things like, the family is the best way to raise children and to organize society. We need the common sense of recognizing that we can say things about the world that we know to be true through accumulated experience, direct experience. When we see crime going on all around us, we say, why is there an upsurge of crime? It can't just be because human nature is evil, because the crime rate has gone up. Human nature has been constant all along. Why is the crime rate so much higher now? And the answer is Democrats. Or to put it, there's a different set of policies in place that have emboldened the criminals and weakened the influence of law enforcement and of the cops. So we need common sense. It is in short supply these days. We can conclude by saying, alas, that common sense is not so common.